Hello. My name is Zach Watson. I'm here to bring to you a live interview with Michelle Jenkins. Michelle has been really an unbelievable part of my life. I've been a part of a series of landmark courses since 2013. She was a staff member there. And when she was constantly a person that was amazing at listening, amazing at giving you coaching and putting it back on you for you to take responsibility. She has been one of those people that you can count on to have an amazing and transformational conversation. And I think one of the favorite things that I've ever had a breakthrough in a conversation with you, Michelle, is you said, well, Zach, how can you have it all? I don't even remember what the thing was that we were talking about, but I was talking about various things that I didn't think that I could have it all. And you gave me this idea, and I think I use that quite a bit, actually, is asking, how could I have this all? Michelle is currently working on and is planning on releasing a book in September, Mothers of Black Boys in Action. Michelle, if you could start off just by telling us a little bit about the book, and letting the viewers know what it is, what's the intention of the book, how did it get started, and the question I'm excited to ask is, when did you know that this book needed to exist?
Well, thank you for having me here, Zach. I'm excited to be with you. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And thank you for the acknowledgement, too.
Welcome.
Yeah, so the title of my book is M.O.B.B in Action, Mothers of Black Boys, and the subtitle is Unleashing the Brilliance of Boys of Color. And my intention of this book is to impact, support, and coach women or anyone mentoring a young person, and to provide them with what they need to be the launching pad for their young people, particularly boys of color. That's my niche. That's the area of my life that's, really been me being a demonstration of what it's like to raise an extraordinary young man. Now, I've done that. And that's been my inspiration, for writing the book. And it's so interesting how it all came about. My son called me and he said, Mom, my boss wants to talk to you. He wants to have a conversation with you about putting an article in the newsletter at our job about me. And he wants the backstory from you on what you did to, have me show up. So I was totally moved by that. And his boss called me. Him and I connected, and he shared a few stories about my son and things that happened at his job where he knew my son was the go-to guy. They had a situation where a customer was livid and they didn't know what to do about it. And this customer wanted to speak to the owner of the company, and his boss said, I knew what to do. He said, I sent Nick in, Nick handled it. The customer called back and said the young man was exceptional. The matter's resolved. And he said, that's the kind of guy he is. He's the go-to guy. He shows up like nobody else shows up in the company. And he said, we want to do a story and we'd like to interview you. So he calls me back to interview me. And I had 3 of his company staff members, along with a writer of the company. And what was really interesting, I shared stories about my son, and I have tons of them. And these 3 grown men were emotional. They got teary-eyed. And the writer said, I've written a lot of stories. He said, this one is special. This one really hits me at a place that other stories haven't. He said, I'm becoming attached. And he said, this is going to take on a life of its own. He said, we're doing an article now, but I could see other things come out of this. And at that point, I had written a little story about what was happening on a page, one of the pages I belong to on Facebook. And to my surprise, over 4,000 women were impacted and responded in ways where they were sharing with me that they were in tears reading my story, that they wanted to know if I was going to write a book, did I have a podcast, could I coach them? It was overwhelming to see that. And I got emotional because my journey has been contributing and making a difference for people. For 42 years, I've been involved with personal development. And to see a need and to see a want and to know that I could provide something with my years of training and development, with my years of raising a son, he's 42 now, that I definitely have something to contribute. So I responded, to these women saying, like, what can I do to support you? And from there, I began to write. And from writing, the universe opened up and began to work on my behalf. One thing after the other began to show up. I started writing. I was in a conference for global transformation that I had previously registered for. So I was with 1,000 people that were, committed to impacting the world one way or another. So I, was so inspired by being a part of that. Shortly after that, I met someone who was an author and a publisher and totally transformed. This man is just extraordinary. He's been working with me with my book. And this is all within 3 months. This is all like 3 months from now. So yeah, the journey has been a full circle for me. Years ago, I remember when I was 12 years old and on my block, young people would play jacks and hopscotch and jump rope. There was like a lot of activity happening. And I remember I was about 12 years old and I looked up from the, group of children and I thought to myself, where are all the dads? Like I just for a moment got present to that dads are missing. And I remember one neighbor that had a father in the house. And that thought in that moment had me on this journey as I got older, to seek out like a structure for mentoring young boys. There was a project with Landmark, the Self-Expression Leadership Program project, but my project was having young men mentor young boys. So it's been there for me for decades, this newfound like purpose. And my experience is that I've been pregnant for like 50 years and I'm finally giving birth. It's been growing inside of me for all of these years. And finally, because it's been a joy and it's been like the experience of I'm the one, like the need and the want, falls on my lap. And the contribution that I get to make is outside of me. It's not me talking. It's this almost like I'm the vessel for this, even writing my book. I'll go back to a chapter and read it and think, did I write that? Did that come out of me? It's like I'm channeling something. It's like I said, it's a full circle. Like my purpose is alive and real. And I get to, participate in a way that, is home for me.
I know that when I was writing a book in 2016, I felt like I had a lot of imposter syndrome writing things. I can't say that I've had the experience that you're talking about. I definitely felt like I was in like a state of flow as I was writing it, but not nearly like what you're talking about right now. Have you found that you've also, as you're writing, like going through negative thoughts around your writing and like, who am I to say this? Do you ever have those kind of experiences?
You know what, Zach? I don't have those experiences. When I read it, I'm clear that my writing is to everybody. My writing is for a dad that's raising a son. My writing is for women that are not necessarily from African descent. My writing is for your auntie, your grandma, your mama. My writing is for like any and everybody. And everything that I've done, I can put it on paper and say, here, take this on. I started when my son was in kindergarten, some of what I got from my personal development, and I instilled it in him early on. And there's so many stories. And I didn't realize there were so many stories to flow from me until I started writing. Sometimes I have a recorder and I could be out in public and I'll think of a story or I'll talk to someone and they'll bring something up and I'll think about, wow, I hadn't thought about that story. And I'll record it so that I can come back and transcribe it. So it's like it's like water flowing. I don't have it. I totally have it that this book is going to contribute and make the biggest difference for so many people. And my book is really not just about people that are reading it. It's about them reading it, being impacted by it, and they take it and provide it to someone else. And then it is provide it to the next generation and then the next generation. This book is not for my grandchildren. It's for their great, 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 great grandchildren. This conversation, I should say, not necessarily the book, but the conversation being duplicated over and over again so that something new and something like that's never happened before. As a Black community, a lot's been done in terms of justice, and civil rights. There's been like activism, there's been marching, there's been laws changed, there's been the prison reform, there's been things happening. But I say that what's missing is being in the trenches and having these intimate, transformational conversations with little people so that they grow up to be extraordinary big people. Not to say it's not too late to have it with older people, but yeah, so the journey is to really impact. And that's where I come from, like every moment of writing. I come from like contribution, like this is awesome. This is going to make a big, big, big difference. So yeah, I don't have any negative or any kind of imposter syndrome with it.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask one of the favorite, I think, stories I heard from the other interview was when you talked about the contract that you wrote with your son about the car. I want you to tell that story, and I have a follow-up question for it.
Okay, sure. Okay, so when my son was 16 years old, I lived in Virginia, and in Virginia, you can get your driver's license at 16 years old. And he had his driver's license and wanted a vehicle. And I was clear that I wanted him to be safe, and I wanted to be sure that anything that could possibly go wrong would not. So I put together a contract, and the contract included no paraphernalia in the vehicle, cleaning out the vehicle when everyone exits the vehicle. He had to pay a small portion of his auto insurance, just to be responsible, right? And bathing the dog, doing his homework, just him being responsible. And so I wrote this contract up and I presented it to him. It was a page and a half, so it was quite a detailed, specific, I didn't miss anything contract. And he looked it over and was a little reluctant to sign it. And at that point, I was a paralegal in a law firm, and I'm sitting in my desk one day, and my son walks into the office when he has his contract in his hand, and he makes a request to speak to the attorney that I work with to review the contract to determine whether or not he should sign it. So he goes into the attorney's office, and they're in there talking, and they both come out, and the attorney looks at me and looks at my son, and he says, "Do not sign the contract." He was joking, of course, but he said it's too many clauses in here. So, my son ended up signing the contract, but my purpose in providing it was for him to know in advance, the consequence of what his agreement was. He knew that if he came in after his curfew, he would hand me the car keys and go to his room. There was no need to have dialogue about that. And it really set him up. It set him up to be a responsible human being. This man is on time. He's reliable for that. He's known as being someone at the company that is the go-to man. If they need anything, his boss said that, there's individuals in the company that sometimes can be challenging. And he said, my son runs the meetings when they have meetings, and he said, when my son walks into the room, everybody straightens up. Everybody's, because they're interested in what he has to say. And he has a level of flow with his ability to be present in the room, and people respect him. They really respect him. So, it's a place to point to, what happened to him when he was younger, all the years of his life, at 7, 8, 9. I mean, I have tons of stories that point to something.
One of my questions about that. So I feel like my parents did something like that. They gave me contracts. They weren't paralegal status, but I feel like I always kind of pushed up against them. And I know, so I am a teacher, and I work with a small school group of ladies that live there. And I think one of the huge challenges we have as teachers as well, so we're considered caregivers because they live there. And so having a consistent response across the board for when they're swearing, when they're doing what they're not supposed to, it's really hard to have that consistent response. So getting them to the point where they know they've broken their contract, or they know they've broken the rules, and they know what there is to do is to hand over the keys like he did for you. How did you get to the point with him that he wasn't even going to fight about it? Because I feel like that's
Zach, you're breaking up.
I feel like I feel like one of the challenges that I think my parents had with me, and I think I have with my students, is even when you set really clear boundaries, how do you get it to the point where they are just handing over the keys when they acknowledge that they're wrong? Did that question
You're
make
breaking
it
up?
through?
I'm getting some of what you're saying.
Okay. That's annoying. Here, I think I can put it in the chat. How do you get it? I'm trying to rephrase my question. How do you get it to the point where they just hand over the keys?
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Yeah. I heard you that time. Yeah. It's not just writing up a proposal or a contract and handing it over. It's really creating a relationship. And it's creating a relationship one-on-one. And it provides like an opportunity to balance the love discipline relationship, because you can't do too much of one or do too much of the other without it having like an impact where they feel loved and respected, even at whatever age they are. And I believe that having it be almost engaging and almost to the point where it's a challenge for them too. Some things can be a challenge, which can be fun. Like you're saying, okay, you have until 9 o'clock to be home. So now they're out in the world. They're like looking at it may not occur as a fun game, but there's something about times being responsible, being accountable, and being respected. It's really, it provides more than one can imagine. There's something in the background of like maybe students in a classroom where it could become a game where it's a challenge between them. Like who's going to have the most pennies when they leave the classroom today, or who, incorporating something where not only is it individually like impactful for them, but it's like corporately like making a difference too. They get to see it in a whole nother, perspective. I think including all of that. But I think the bottom line is that there's got to be a relationship. I have a friend who, and you've probably seen this on Facebook and TikTok or whatever, but I have a friend who was a principal of a school. And he said that his commitment to being related to his students looked like this. In the morning, when they would come in, there would be 2 giant doors. And one of the doors, as they were coming in, would be locked as they were coming into the school. And he would stand at the door, and he would greet each student as they came in. They either had to give him a high five, they either had to give him a hug or a fist bump, or there's something where, and they had to look him in the eye, because he wanted them to know, I got your back. Like, I know who you are. Like, they felt known. That simple, little thing he did was just, I thought was really great. Having them be known, each individual be known.
I don't know if you're still going to be able to hear me. So my follow-up question to that, you can hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I feel like that was really smart what you said about, like, you got to make sure that there's enough like love that they're aware of, but at the same time that there's a good amount of discipline. How do you know? Now, I'm about to be a parent in the very near future. Alyssa's 39 weeks pregnant. And I mean, my head is swirling with these things all the time now, is thinking about discipline and how I want it to be different from me teaching. I wonder how do you know when there's too much love and not enough discipline, or vice versa, too much discipline and like not enough love?
Yeah, that's a real dance. I never had to think about that, actually. I would give the love just out of giving the love, and then the discipline, either it was structured or it was in the moment. But when you're balancing that, when they know that they get hugs, and they get maybe the timeout as well, that balance provides something. Because if you're too intense with punishment and whatever else, they're going to miss out on the other side of that. So I think go with your father wit with that, because you will know. My mom had 4 boys and 4 girls.
Wow.
And none of us ever felt like she loved one more than the other. We all felt so loved. But you know something? When my mom said something, she meant what she said, and she said what she meant. But we respected her. We loved her. She loved us, and we always felt that from her. But we knew, mom didn't, she wasn't playing. And she did it with 8 children.
That's crazy.
Well, 7, yeah.
Did when you were, as you're raising Nick, did you ever find moments where you felt like you were disciplining too much, or you were not being disciplined enough, and like you would sort of correct your course?
If I did, it was when I got older and I looked back on it and I said, there was a moment where I had someone that was to pick him up from school, and he was probably in the 7th grade, 6th grade, maybe 5th or 6th grade. And the person came to pick him up, who was on the list to pick him up. And then he came off the list to pick him up. And then I went to pick him up, and this person was there picking him up, and Nick was in his car. And I was like really upset. And my demonstration of upset was to Nick, right? And he didn't know, and I apologized to him a while later when I came to my senses about it. But yeah, like there were moments like that, but I can't recall very many of those. Yeah, I can't recall very many of those type moments. Yeah, I have more moments where, I was pretty clear in my communication with him, and he would get, the reality of it. Yeah.
There was a statement that you made in the other interview where you were saying that as a Black mother of a Black boy, that you know better than most other parents, like what the possible outcomes, what bad things could possibly happen if he were being irresponsible with his vehicle and stuff. I wanted to bring this up because I think, last year when the Black Lives Matter movement was having like a ton of steam when George Floyd had just lost his life, there was a video on TikTok that I saw. There's a video on TikTok that I saw that I don't know if it's that it changed my mind, but it kind of woke me up to something that I don't think I was ever quite present to. And I wanted to see if you would agree with it. I know it made sense at the time. I think it still makes sense. There was a young man was sharing how he felt it was different for him being Black versus maybe his neighbors or something, or his other people in his community that were white. And he said that he would always, like, even if he was just going down the street, he would always make sure people knew where he was. Whenever he'd go into a store, he would make sure to get a receipt and a bag, even if it was just like a stick of gum or something. Are small things like that I know there are more of those, but are there similar things that kind of go through your head that you would train Nick to do, to be aware of where there are racial disparities in our country?
Yeah, I couldn't hear everything you said, but I did get the gist of what you said. Yeah.
Got it.
Oh, it definitely, and those things were natural things, as a Black mother to a son, Black child, you know, my concern mostly was who he was with. My concern was usually him being in the wrong place at the right time or the right place at the wrong time, and then something happened in that environment. Because he was in and out of those type environments. He'd come home, but he'd go back into certain environments because relatives, would live in, or friends would live in certain environments that I was concerned about. And so those conversations about, they don't really think about it. It's not like us as Black people get together and talk about, oh, make sure you tell your son to get a receipt when he comes out of the store, or to keep his hands out of his pocket, or to not talk back, or to be respectful. Those conversations definitely happened, and they were necessary conversations. My son, there was a situation when he was younger, where he was in a vehicle with his friends. He was driving, and he had a girlfriend of his sitting next to him, and in the back seat, his best friend and his girlfriend was in the car, and they were driving, and Nick's driving, and all of a sudden, his girlfriend, he's probably like 17 at this point. His girlfriend's screaming and hollering, and he's like, going back, and the wheels going back and forth. He's looking at her, trying to figure out like what's going on. And there was a driver next to them with a gun, pointing a gun to them in the car while they were driving. And then Nick saw it. He's like trying to get away. The person's like, this guy's following them, and he had a bandana on his head, like a Civil War kind of emblem.
Yeah.
And Nick, he ended up jumping off the highway, and Nick followed him and got his plate number, and I ended up calling the police. The police went to the house, and he said to the police officer that a gun was pulled out of him first. Now, these 4 kids were good kids. My son was very popular in my town. He was in the newspaper all the time and on TV all the time. And I wanted to press charges. And my attorney that I worked with said to me, you got to consider the fact that Nick is somewhat of a celebrity in the town here. He's on his way to college. And, this story could impact that. His word against his word. And I had to pretty much let it go. And I tell you, that experience of just not saying anything about that and letting that go, that will forever be with me. That this man got away with something like that, just playing around with some young Black teenagers. He thought it was a funny joke, and it wasn't. And that's how you turn a really good kid around to a kid that wants revenge, or a kid that wants to, change their behavior because of something outside of them. I had never seen my son as angry as he was about that. So, even though you tell them what there is to do, you take these precautions and make sure that they get what they need, and you always have situations like that will come up. It'll be some, situation that is unfair and unjust, and, sometimes just really a disgrace.
How did you manage that situation with him and not letting that turn him into an angry young man that would impact him in a negative way?
Yeah, I just sat down and shared with him another part of the journey that we were on. The other part is that we could fester in this and be angry with this and have this be an issue, or we could look into the future. Your next chapter is going to be a really huge chapter for you. And I just had his focus be on what was possible in his life and the next exciting journey, opposed to this thing that happened in the past that could send you down some spiral, and have it turn into something really unbearable. So just keeping it, on a note where he could see the future, something more positive out in his future.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. It's the first I've heard that one. Real quick, I wanted to jump over into the comments. There's a couple people that are here live. I don't know if you can see them. Gemma says hello. Sky says congrats on the baby. Ken Watson says hi, Michelle and Zach. Lisa Shetner says hello, everyone. Beautiful outfit, Michelle. Stunning. Sky says life as a minority is scary because you have to be on a guard doing normal things. This reminds me of the struggles in the LGBT community. Sky, feel free to elaborate on that more. Michelle, I know one of the things that I've found really interesting as you've been talking about the book that you're working on is when you first there have been a couple times where you've been talking about how surprising it was when you could actually start advertising and talking about the book before it was finished. What's that experience been like?
Oh my goodness. That's such a huge deal for me. And the whole process, I put myself in a book camp, and it was a process where the instructor gave us an assignment every day. And one of the days of the assignment, and this is, I was like a chapter in, maybe not even completed a chapter. And he says, so this assignment is, I'd like you all to post on your social media that you're now writing, and you're going to offer your book at a pre-launch discount of half price, and you'll sign the book. And if you could see everyone's face on that Zoom course, they were like, people were, like, what? Like, are you kidding? And so I raised my electronic hand and I said, are you saying to sell this book that hasn't been written yet? And he said, absolutely, that's what I'm saying. And I said, well, I have no idea about publishing, editing. I've never written a book before. I said, are you going to provide us with that information? And he said, I'll provide that information, but I'll provide it tomorrow. So most of the people in the group they were like not going to do it. They're like, I just can't do that. I'm too fearful. And I looked at him and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I posted that exact post, and I had, within 48 hours, I had 60 people buy this book. And I can't explain to you the experience of that. Like throwing your hat over the fence. It was a real lesson, and I'm someone that usually will do that, but to do it in a public arena and be responsible for that, like knowing, like, once you say, okay, I'm taking your money, there's like a level of accountability and responsibility that goes along with that. Yeah. But it was invigorating. What it provided? The experience of being alive. Like, when you're fearful or you're stopped or whatever, when that adrenaline gets pumping, that's a great thing. Like you're actually like above ground, you get to play, you get to be bold and daring. And that was everything for me to do that. It just set me up for like what's to come now. And it's been a beautiful journey.
Now, if you were talking with someone that were about to start writing their book, would you recommend having them do the same? Like, has that accountability helped you through this process?
Oh, definitely. It definitely, with the support of my coach, and, throwing my hat over the fence, it definitely launched it for me. And, in the launching of that and the experience of that, it's like the universe started working on my behalf. Things just started showing up that were kind of like shocking. I sent a message to Marianne Williamson, and she emailed me back and wants my book. That was just kind of like, I'm walking around in circles, spinning around in circles. Like, are you kidding me?
I know that name.
That's what the universe is providing. Say it again?
I know that name, but I can't put a finger on who that is. Who is Marianne Williamson?
She did the Course in Miracles. She did the S training. She ran for president. She was on the ballot to run for president this last election. Yeah, she's the goddess of the study of ontology.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like one of the conversations I have with a lot of other people writing books is I challenge them to put things out on social media. Um, I know for myself, there's a lot of I've gotten very comfortable with sharing things on social media, and I think a lot of people haven't quite made it to that spot yet. But I challenge people all the time to put those things out there and use that public accountability to drive them. Because I think some people are so afraid to like be held accountable for big dreams. And I feel like that is a really great way to propel them forward, is that like that almost fear of, I don't really want it to be fear, but like I imagine it's a little bit of fear that makes us invigorated, and has us go deep into that, um, is like not wanting to look ridiculous, or not like having to sheepishly give money back or something. But I think so many people are afraid of stepping into those dreams and really going like diving headfirst in.
Yeah, yeah. And it's such a training and development opportunity when you do that, because once you do it, you can do it again and then do it again, and then you perfect your craft in the process of doing it again and again and again. I loved your climate control video. That was unbelievable. I mean, that was
Thank you.
great. I said that to like someone who's like really playing that in a big, big way. They were very impressed. Yeah, I sent you his link, but yeah, that was really well done.
Thank you. That was my first original rap song. One of my students made the beat. Before then, I had all of the beats that I'd been rapping on. I was remixing people's songs, and I was sort of stealing their flow, because I was still getting a gauge on how to rap, and like how to rap on beat. That was the first song. One of my students, actually, he said, "Zach, you gotta stop remixing stuff and make your own music." And that was his beat that made that happen.
Wow, great.
Um,
I sent it to a few people. It was really, really done well, and it
Thank
really
you.
it gave the message too. It really provided a wonderful message in the
Thank you.
process. You got to enjoy the whole process, and you got educated. Well
Thank
done.
you. There's another question I was going to. Oh, are there any favorite parts of the book that you'd like to share with us, and or would you like to read anything for us?
Let's see. Yeah, I do have something that I wanted to read. I have so much in here, but I wanted to read just a little section about attitude and disposition. Because when teens when young people become teens, something shifts. I know I shifted. There was something that shifted when my mom and our relationship was not the same. Like I could do nothing right, and it just kind of, eventually it's simmered off. But it was something about those teen years. Just real quick, my mom passed away 11 years ago, and she was very organized, and she left all of us envelopes. And inside these envelopes were things that we had given her over the years. We had no idea she had saved these. I had little Tony the Tiger postcards from 7 years old that I had sent her when I was away, and notes from camp. And when I was a teenager, I wrote her this drama-filled letter about a punishment she put me on. And then all these love letters. It's like 100 letters. The love letters telling her how much I love her, and I'm so thankful for everything she provided to me. So yeah, so teenage years can be challenging. That one letter that I sent her, it's like it's a 3 pages legal size paper written on both sides. And when I read it, after she passed, I opened this letter that I wrote when I was 17 years old. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what I put her through writing all this drama. Like, why did you put me on punishment? I didn't do what you said I did. You're not there. But I cherish that. I cherish these letters. And I mean, who has this? Who has 100 letters that you and your mom wrote back and forth? But yeah, like I said, I'd like to just share about a part of my book about attitude and disposition.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so let's look at attitude and disposition. Whatever he practices, he will master. We sometimes are reactions waiting to happen in dealing with attitudes. This is a major opportunity in you knowing you are the mirror. We know that stuff happens in life, and we know that there are times when you experience your king giving you attitude. Another invitation to you, first just breathe for a nanosecond. Then have a moment of just being with the situation. Give him time to do some personal inventory. Believe me, I get it when you want to take other actions with this, particularly when it is something that may annoy the crap out of you. I'm sharing my life experiences that worked and want you to consider being coachable here. This may not be the formula you are familiar with, and I took it straight from my mom. It worked for her, and it worked for me. I remember when Nick was about 13 years old, he got angry about a request to stay the night with a friend. I declined his request, and he said in a very angry tone, totally unlike him, "I can't wait to leave out of here." I looked at him and said very calmly, "I'm glad to know you feel that way." I walked away and continued painting the bathroom. He was upstairs, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, we attended church, and of course, lo and behold, the pastor talked about obedience and forgiveness. Nick was even asked to come up and be a part of the conversation. The pastor spoke about how God forgives us for our disobedience and used the example of Nick saying something disrespectful to his mother and asking for forgiveness. My jaw dropped. How much more fortuitous could that have been? When Nick and I got in the car, before I could turn the key in the ignition, he grabbed my hand and said, "Mom, I am so sorry for how I talked to you." With tears filling up in my eyes, I told him that I forgave him. This was a moment where I allowed life to take its course rather than yelling at him for his behavior or having some resentment grew up. If we're going to have them master anything, why not how to handle themselves in life? So that's like a little clip there.
Wow. That's crazy. Now, I'm curious what, if anything, I'm curious how that would have unfolded if it weren't for the Sky in the comments is saying some divine intervention. I wonder how that would have unfolded, like how long it would have taken him for him to like discover that he was so sorry about it. I'm trying to remember if, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the point is, it's even if you're in dialogue with someone, like you're talking to them, they may be saying things that could sound offensive to you, but let them say what there is to say. Like, have it all be complete for them, for all to get down to like nothing. And that's when something like like I know, without being down to nothing. And that was the purpose of not having all this back and forth. Like, it was an opportunity for him to like be with something. If it wasn't that, it would have been something else, I'm sure. Some other thing would have come up, or he'd have come and said what he had to say, but I wasn't being a reaction to him. And I think a lot of times that gets us in a real swirl with people when we start reacting. It's back and forth and back and forth. And believe me, I've used this with my siblings, and my relationship with them is just really amazing, because it's not ever like I'm going to fight. It's like I'm going to give space. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to allow you to say what there is for you to say. Sometimes just in the saying, people see something for themselves.
I know one of the things that I feel like I've been getting trained and developed quite a bit at my current job. So as our students are dealing with a lot of clinical and traumatic parts of their life, that's a huge part of the care that we provide for them. As staff members, we're taught to not overly react, like keep a neutral tone when they're having a big reaction, so that they can practice like working on themselves. So I'm hoping that I will. One of my proudest moments recently was one of the students was saying, "Zach, why were you yelling at us today?" And I was like, I don't think I was yelling at you. And then I turned to one of the other girls at the lunch table. I said, "When's the last time you've heard me yell at you guys?" She's like, "Zach, you've been here for a little over a year. I don't think you've ever yelled at me." And I think that was the best compliment that I could have gotten, is knowing that I'm able to keep that neutral tone and not react, even though I probably all the time want to. Like, they'll look every once in a while, they'll look at me, I can't believe your wife is still married to you, or you're going to be a terrible dad someday, or like they love throwing those things at you to see if they can get under your skin. So I'm hoping this will be great training for when my daughter can start speaking, and or just learning how to be calm when she keeps crying and I don't know how to stop it just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll all come to you. It'll all be a flow.
Was it when you were learning how to not react to people like this, what was there like is there a moment when you almost like discovered that this was the way to react to people? Like, when did
Yeah.
you learn to cultivate this skill?
Yeah, like a way to respond rather than react, like responding. Yeah, and it's for me, it was a process that I was willing to practice something, and that's what it takes initially. You got to be willing to transform or shift some way of being. If you're walking around as a reaction, and for me, I noticed that the willingness had me initially notice that I could be a reaction, and then I would put in. I'll give you an example with one of my sisters. Like my interaction sometime with her, I would be a reaction to what she said, but I remember stopping the action, and I might have some internal stuff going on about it, but I would stop the action in a nanosecond and listen, and then speak. For example, I'll give you a specific. I was coordinating a Thanksgiving dinner several years ago. I was on staff working 12-hour days. So I was pretty busy, and I waited until the last minute to provide them with what they needed. And I provided it to them on Facebook like 2 weeks before. And when I put it on Facebook, my sister responded in the comments and said, Michelle, I'm your sister. Why are you putting this on Facebook? You could call me, like that. And when I read it, when I was reading it, I was thinking like, who does she think she was? And I stopped, like, just like in a nanosecond. And I thought, I can get that. I can put myself over there where she's at. I said, I could get that. So I called her up and I said, you know what? You're right. I could have actually called you. You are my sister, and I could have made the call. And she said, yeah. And it was just a simple conversation. It wasn't like trying to be right about anything or want to argue about anything. Just like giving her grace and space. And that's what, she would have preferred. And then we started talking about something else right after. And so I practiced that, and I have a nanosecond sometime, but you wouldn't even know it. It's such an instant of like looking at it going one way and then shifting it to something else, to be a listener. I've had someone say to me, I'm a racist. Can I have a conversation with you? I'm like, okay, great. What makes you think you're a racist? Or someone saying to me once, I think you're a BIT, you know what? And I said, really? Like, I was interested in finding out more about that. Like, not as a reaction, but like curious. And after he shared everything he had to say, he ended up hugging me and laughing about it. Like, the whole BITC thing was like so made up on his part over something that, didn't even exist. And that's what listening provides, an opportunity to hear something new, something you didn't know, giving people space.
What kind of tone was that message delivered to you in?
Which one?
The BITCH one. Like, I know you're saying it very calmly, but I'm imagining.
Exactly, Zach. Yeah. He just said it like this. I think he said, Michelle, I just want to tell you that I think you're a bit stuck. I don't want to curse on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said, yeah. He just kind of just delivered it that way.
Yeah.
Just delivered it. But for me, when I heard him say it, like, because I know I'm not that.
Yeah.
It was like him saying, it's raining outside. I was like, really? Like, like walking around not being like a victim of something. Like, that's his stuff. That was something going on over there with him. It had nothing to do with me. But I was curious.
If I feel like this might be an obvious answer to this question, but if people listening to this wanted to better cultivate this skill of not reacting and like being able to hear people say things like that and be like, oh, it's raining outside, like almost what kind of exercises would you, I feel like this is an obvious question, it's just practice on the people that are upset with you every day, but are there any exercises or things that you would recommend so that they can more quickly improve this kind of skill?
It's like anything. I was an MVP in college playing basketball. I was playing basketball last week. So not bad. I'm playing more with shooting, but it's the practicing of anything that you do to get to master it, or at least proficient in it. And if you're willing to take this on, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna fly off the deep end a few times because then afterwards you're like, oh, I did it again. But that's part of the practicing. You think about it, you say it, you realize you screwed up, and then you just keep practicing. And what you'll notice is that like there'll be a moment where you're screwed up and it'll go on loudspeaker, right? And then you'll keep practicing, and then a little bit of it will go on loudspeaker, and you'll notice that, like, oh, almost. And then, the next few times, it'll be a thought, and it won't even be on loudspeaker. And it may be a thought for just a minute or whatever, and then it'll become like a nanosecond thought, like a thought, like it'll be right there, and then you alter your state about it. You get to that point from the practicing of it. So that would be the only technique that I think would be efficient, that can have you be in a place where you could be with any communication.
I was gonna say, I feel like if one of my clients for coaching were to come to me and say this is a skill they wanted to work on, I think one of the things I would probably have them do is keep a journal about it, and then at the end of every day, have 2 or 3 prompts saying like, what was a situation that occurred today where someone came at you with a challenging communication that you didn't have to react to, and then how did you react? What was the internal dialogue? Which of the internal dialogue did you end up putting on loudspeaker, and how much of it did you keep to yourself? And like, what would be, if you were to get to redo that again, how would you react any differently? Because I feel like journaling has got to be one of the most impactful ways that I can think of people creating awareness to something that they're committed to.
Yeah, that's really good, Zach. And I know from my experience of working with other individuals, when I was on staff, it was hundreds of people all day, every day. And I know what worked was like live interactions about it, like talking about it, like, if you're willing to transform it, you've got to be willing to talk about it. And I would talk about that particular conversation with particular graduates. And I would say that, that you are a reaction, or you are abrasive, or whatever that thing was. And what I would do is they would walk away from me, and then they'd have an agreement, like, okay, I know that I do this. I'm going to practice. I'm willing to transform this. I'm going to just listen for, that I did like this whole thing. And then they'd walk away from me. Within a minute, I would say something like, you're going to be late for your class. And then they'd be, they'd go into thing, and I would do it on purpose, right? Just to test them. And then they would do it, and I'd look at them like, you just did that again. And then they'd go like, ah! Like having it like a presence, like, like it's ongoing, like presence for them. When you have people in your life that'll play with you that way, you get to transform it a lot quicker than doing it on your own.
Yeah, I was gonna say, another thing I'm thinking of is that I know through Landmark I've been able to adjust how I use language, and I think a really impactful way that I'm really lucky that I have Alyssa to practice with this every day is when I'm saying like, this person is being rude to me. If that's like how I initially would say it, I can start changing it to it's occurring to me that this person is being rude to me. And when you can start inserting that part of it's occurring to me, then you can actually change the way that it occurs. But if that person is rude, then there's nothing to do with that. You can't change if something is a certain way, but you can change the way things occur differently. So I would definitely invite people that are trying to work on that to insert that sort of language to try to adjust, almost like add like a middleman or like a wedge in between like thought to reality, and like insert the fact that there's also a context in between that we can adjust that context. Like there's something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was.
Just went out real quick. I missed the last thing you said.
Oh, just it reminds me of a Viktor Frankl quote. I think it's that mindfulness is the space in between stimulus and reaction. So when you're able to insert some language like it occurs for me that adds like mindfulness, that adds presence and awareness to a situation.
Right. Yeah. And it's having you be responsible for something too.
Yeah.
Like it occurs to me, it occurs rather than, you are or it is. Yeah. I totally speak that language, like that it occurs to me that, whether it's the truth or not.
And I think you and me have had the privilege of having so many people that will be around us and will be committed to having us and them have that breakthrough. So I think if people can enroll other people in their lives that they communicate with constantly, say, hey, I'm working on my ability to respond rather than react. Can you help me, label those moments when I'm reacting in a certain way? Can you say, I know Gemma's been pointing out in the comments that this is something that she wants to work on, and saying, Gemma, it sounds like you're overreacting or you're reacting to the situation. Is there anything you want to say about that? Or like someone that'll be really frank with us. I know I have a really good relationship with my cousin who's also been through the forum and the introduction leaders program. And we will have those conversations that are tough, and we'll say, I am having a huge reaction internally right now to what you just said. I need a moment to process this.
That's being responsible.
Yeah.
For them the moment to be responsible for it.
Yeah, and we're taking a master class recently, and one of the phrases that they used was amygdala hijack. So like when all of a sudden that part of your brain just takes over. So we've been at home, me and Alyssa have been using that all the time now. Is like, Alyssa, I think you might be having an amygdala hijack right now. And sometimes she'll say that to me and like, yep, that's definitely what's going on. Okay, regroup in 2 minutes. I'm gonna go clean something or make the bed or something. I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, I have a friend who calls me up and she'll say that to me. I'm having an amygdala hijack. I need to be cleared. Clear me. Yeah, it's great to have people in your life that can provide that. And then I love what you said about someone coming to someone and saying, look, I do this thing, I want support. When I do it, can you like acknowledge that I'm there doing that thing? Yeah, because it's a lot of freedom and peace when that's not the case. When you could be someone walking around in the world that's, responding to communications opposed to reacting to communications. It's a real clear distinction there.
I was gonna say another thing that I think is interesting, because I know I've asked people before to like help me identify an area and like help me deal with it, and I've recognized sometimes people aren't great at taking on that request because we've trained them through our upset reactions to respond in a different way. So they have to break their own pattern in like even responding to our reaction. So if every time you tell me that I'm late and I get mad at that, you're not going to want to say something after I get mad, because I've trained you to not want to deal with mad Zach.
Yeah. See, you can train them the other way too. Like I
Yeah.
have a relative that it was a not combative relationship years ago, but it was kind of cat and mouse. And when I started altering how I was being and not being a reaction,
Mm-hmm.
this person altered as well. Like
Mm.
our interactions are so different now because they have nothing to feed on. If I'm going to be a reaction, there's something to feed on now. They could, feed on that. It's like starting a fire, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But if they have nothing to feed on, you just like, say, what you just said occurred to me. Like they're either going to not say anything at all, or they're going to say something that's balanced with what you're saying. You train people how to even respond to your respond. And it does happen. It's like amazing. No one, it's so interesting that this study of ontology, no one told us years ago that, if you really be with someone's communication, like really get what they're saying, without adding anything, just being there, what they're saying is going to disappear. We didn't grow up knowing that, but, and even someone to tell you something like that, you're thinking like, what? Like, how could that work? But it does. It just makes the biggest difference. Giving people space, even inside of the reaction mechanism we have.
I imagine it sounds like, based on the story you told about your son dealing with the really upset person, it sounds like you've trained him very well in these strategies.
Oh my goodness, my son is just like
that story you shared about during my dad's birthday call about the basketball tournament, and then the guy chucking the basketball at him and him just like letting it roll off his shoulder. Like that's amazing to me, because I've been in a couple of those types of tournaments before. I've never had a ball chucked at me, but I can remember myself being significantly upset for much, much smaller things. So it's amazing that you were able to
blew
train
my
it.
mind. They got the article in the newsletter at his company, and they put that story in the newsletter. And they talk about me, and not one of my proudest moments as a mother, but I was gonna like clobber that kid, not my kid, but it was a kid bothering my son. Now everybody probably wants to hear the story now that we built it up. Like
Yeah. So from what I remember, you had said it was that your son was in like a 3-on-3 tournament, like outdoor, I'm imagining,
right.
and he just the whole game, the guy had clearly been just talking smack in his ear, trying to get him aroused out of him, and like trying to get like in his head, and your son just refused to let him get in his head, and at the very end, your son's team won. And the guy like really threw a basketball really hard and hit him in the back of the head, I think you had said.
In his back, like right in the middle of his back, really hard, like a loud sound.
And he just, and you saw it, and you're like, oh no, and you just I remember you saying you walked straight towards the situation, didn't know what you were gonna do. You were just
I was running to the situation.
And he let it roll off. I think you had said he like looked over his shoulder, shrugged, and like went like that.
Yeah. Just let it go.
That's
just let it
unbelievable.
go. It's those kind of moments of choice, when life goes another way. Like who knows what would have happened had he responded or reacted to that.
Yeah, that could have easily been a brawl where someone got really hurt, and police were brought into it. Like that could have been a huge thing.
Right. But he interceded that. He's great with that. He does that. You just gave me another thing to I could include in my book. I'm finishing the last chapter right now. I'm take a note.
So Michelle, we've been talking for a little bit over an hour. Are there any other things that you think you'd like to? I'm not in like a huge time crunch, but are there any other lessons or things that you'd really love to share with the viewers about the book, about the intention of it, the mission behind it, what you're up to, information about yourself, I want to give you the floor.
Yeah. Thank you for asking me. I do have final words, and you know, this book is guiding me. You know, I'm not in this book to be rich. I'm not in this book to, you know, be famous. I'm in this book to like alter the world. I'm like taking this really serious as the accountable person for this. And eventually we'll have a team of accountable people for this. And my commitment is that mothers know who their sons are, no matter what. Like they get to unleash the brilliance of their sons, you know, and that they start early on. And we impact the in the trenches conversations. Like we're on our knees, like nose to nose with our little boys, talking to them, like nose to nose. And that's what it's going to take, like being down there with them, you know, eyeball to eyeball, and speaking like greatness into them, even when they can't see it. And to have that be like a consistency throughout their lives. Because, like I said earlier, we've done a whole lot with like the injustice of Black men in this country. I mean, all over the world, actually. And I say what's missing is like getting down into the trenches and transforming like what's happening there. Because a lot of stuff's, you know, being altered outside of it. You know, I've done marches, I've done, you know, talks, I've done things like that. But, you know, if we're not transforming like the source of what's happening, you know, it's going to continue to go the way it's been going. You know, I remember in 1968 and 69, you know, I lived in Newark, and they had the Newark riots. I remember seeing army men with rifles walking up and down the street, and tanks coming up and down the street, and looting, and it was horrible. And that stuff is going to keep happening over and over again unless we transform like the mindset of like who young Black men are, and like them knowing who they are, because they're great. They're like extraordinary, and it's up to someone, some group. And I say that why not like the mob, the mothers, like the mob, like why not us be the ones to do this? Because you know we can expect anybody to like come for us. You know, in our environment, you know, Black men are missing. They're not there. A lot of single women out there struggling, trying to make it work. And I say that this is gonna like impact our culture in a major way, because it's a missing link in our society. You know, that young boys are not getting everything that they need to get. And I say it's going to impact everything. It'll impact the educational system, for sure, what that looks like. You know, it'll impact the medical industry, like the medical field, like people being healthy, people being strong, people being guided in the right direction. You know, like the incarceration, of course, that's going to be impacted, you know. So yeah, I say that this is my niche, and I'm really excited. And, I'm really committed to like making a huge difference, you know, for women. So it's a big need and a big want.
Well, Michelle, it's been a huge pleasure to have you on here to have this conversation. Where can people find you? Social media? Where can they get your book? Are there any other projects coming that you expect after this?
Yeah, I have a course. It's my first launch course. It's called Unleashing Your Brilliance. And it's going to take place on the 28th, Saturday, 28th of August. And my email, if anyone's interested in registering, it's $99 at a bonus launch discounted price. My email is mobbinaction@gmail.com. That's MOBB inaction@gmail.com. And MOBB stands for Mothers of Black Boys. Okay.
I'll put that in the description when we're done.
Okay. And my book launch is September the 15th. And I have a pre-launch sale right now, you know, for $20. Anyone that wants to book now, they can order it as a pre-launch sale, and they get to have a signed copy. And if you're interested in that, you can send an email and just put in the what's that section called? Put the
body.
Yeah, the headline, the little headline. Yeah. Just put in book sale. Just put book sale in that section. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's all they need to do.
All right.
And it'll be available on Amazon after the 15th of September.
Now, are you self-publishing it, or is it being
No, I
published
have
through
a
a
publisher.
distributor?
I have a publisher. Yeah,
That's
Miracle
awesome.
Publisher. He's awesome.
I've personally done self-publishing. I'm so used to hearing. I think you're the first person I've actually had on this channel as an interview that has done publishing with someone other than a self-publisher. So that's huge.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, again, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm gonna end the broadcast in a moment, and you can stay on. We can chat for a minute. But for everyone that stayed on and watched, thank you. Feel free to leave questions in the comments. And it sounds like you can also reach out to Michelle via that email. I anticipate you're going to be putting out more things on social media. I'm just projecting that into your future. But thank you so much. And
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank everybody for listening in. And I'm available to you.
And to all my viewers, as always, stay weird.